How does a city truly die? It is not with a sudden cataclysm or a single, defining act of violence. A city dies the way a body succumbs to a chronic illness, slowly from the inside out. It begins with a sickness in its economic soul, a decay that eats away at its foundations until the entire structure is poised for collapse. Long before a bat-shaped shadow fell across its skyline, Gotham was already dying. Its tragedy was not that it fell into darkness, but that it was built upon it from the very beginning. To understand Gotham, one must look past the theatrical monsters and the dark knight who hunts them. One must look at the blueprint of its damnation, etched into the very fabric of its history. Gotham was once a titan of industry, a colossus of the 20th century. Its spires, monuments of steel and stone, were built by the great founding families. The Waynes, the Kanes, the Cobblepots. They forged an empire of shipping, manufacturing, and finance, a shining beacon of prosperity. But this was a gilded facade. Beneath the veneer of progress, the city's economic DNA was already coding for its own destruction. The wealth was not a rising tide to lift all boats. It was a dam concentrating fortune in the hands of a select few, while the vast majority were left to toil in the growing shadows, living under a rigid caste system masquerading as opportunity. The first true symptom of the terminal diagnosis was the Great Hollowing. As the world changed, Gotham refused to. The engines of globalism, automation, and outsourcing arrived not as a rising tide, but as a flood that broke the city's brittle economic dams. The shipyards grew silent. The steel mills went cold. The lifeblood of the city, the stable, unionized labor that gave its working class a fragile sense of dignity, was siphoned away, leaving behind a husk. The city's leaders, trapped in a mire of nostalgia and corruption, failed to pivot, failed to innovate, failed to manage the decline. And so entire districts of Gotham began to rot, turning from bustling hubs of production into skeletal landscapes of abandoned factories and forgotten people. This was not a recession, it was an amputation, performed without anesthetic. Into this economic vacuum, a new parasitic ecosystem began to thrive. When legitimate industry dies, illegitimate enterprise takes its place. The organized crime families, the Falcones and the Maronis, were not simply opportunistic predators. They became the new employers, the new providers of order in a city that had none. They offered loans where banks would not, protection where the police could not, and a brutal, violent ladder to climb for those with no other options. This was not anarchy. It was a new system, a dark symbiosis between the crime lords and the city's crumbling institutions. The police department, the courts, the city hall. They did not fight this new order. They partnered with it. Corruption became the city's last functioning industry, a meticulously managed marketplace where justice was the most valuable commodity, sold to the highest bidder. This systemic decay created a permanent, desperate underclass. Entire neighborhoods like the Narrows were not just neglected. They were surgically sealed off from the rest of the city, becoming vast reservoirs of human misery. For the people born there, crime was not a moral failing. It was a rational economic choice in a world that offered no alternatives. They were the children of the city's economic failure, a generation raised in the ruins of their parents' hopes. The despair was a palpable toxin in the air, breeding a deep-seated resentment and a readiness for violence that simmered just beneath the surface. The city was a powder keg of social and economic grievances, its people trapped, its institutions predatory. Gotham was a patient with a terminal illness, its vital signs in a state of slow, grinding decay. It was a city already in its grave, merely waiting for the obituary to be written. But in a system so perfectly designed for failure, a slow death is often not the final act. It is merely the prelude. The city was waiting for a catalyst, an event so shocking it would promise to shake the foundations and offer a path to salvation. But what happens when the proposed cure is not designed to heal the disease but only to wage war on its most visible symptoms? In a city sick to its very core, any savior who ignores the rot within is not a hero. They are merely a more spectacular form of poison. In a system teetering on the brink of total moral and economic collapse, it is often a single, stabilizing pillar that prevents the entire edifice from crumbling. For Gotham, that pillar was not a law or an institution. It was a family. The murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne is remembered as the origin story of a vigilante. But its true significance is far more devastating. It was the moment Gotham's last flicker of hope was extinguished, creating a catastrophic power vacuum that no amount of brute force could ever hope to fill. Thomas Wayne was more than just a billionaire. He was the architect of a dying ideal, compassionate capitalism. While other elites of Gotham retreated into their gilded cages, insulated from the city's decay, he invested his immense fortune and influence directly into the failing systems. His vision was not merely charitable, it was structural. He funded public health initiatives in a city where the poor were left to die. He poured money into social housing projects to counteract the growing rot of the slums. His most ambitious project, a privately funded public transit system, was a direct attempt to bridge the chasm between the city's prosperous heart and its forgotten, isolated limbs. Thomas Wayne was not just giving the city money. He was trying to rebuild its shattered circulatory system. But his most important contribution was a moral one. In a landscape defined by corruption and self-interest, Thomas and Martha Wayne represented an almost alien concept: civic duty. They were the city's conscience, a constant living reminder that wealth carried responsibility. Their presence exerted a gravitational pull on the rest of Gotham's elite, forcing them, through shame or inspiration, to engage in a level of philanthropy that, while insufficient, at least kept the city on life support. They were the patrons of art, science, and education, creating pockets of light in the encroaching darkness. Their very existence held the line, a testament to the belief that Gotham could still be saved through investment and empathy, not just punishment. The gunshots that echoed through Park Row that night did more than orphan a child. They assassinated an idea. With the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne, the spirit of benevolent intervention died with them. The vacuum they left was not just emotional, it was economic and political. The city's elite, now free from the moral pressure exerted by the Waynes, abandoned any pretense of social responsibility. Philanthropy withered. Ambitious public works projects, like the transit system, were left to rust, hijacked by bureaucrats and mobsters who saw them not as infrastructure for the public good, but as assets to be stripped and sold for parts. The social safety net, already threadbare, was now completely severed. This was the moment the disease truly metastasized. Without the Waynes as a counterweight, the parasitic alliance between organized crime and City Hall was no longer a covert partnership. It became the city's de facto government. The Falcone and Moroni families, once operating in the shadows, now stepped into the light, their influence spreading unchecked through every level of the city's administration. They were no longer just criminals. They were the new order. The removal of the Waynes proved that in Gotham, hope was a liability, and compassion was a fatal weakness. The city's last moral compass was broken, and now it was left to spin wildly, pointing only toward power, greed, and survival. Gotham was now a city without a soul, a rudderless ship adrift in a sea of its own making. The murder of its most prominent citizens was not just a crime, it was a verdict. It was the definitive statement that the old way, the path of reform and renewal, was a dead end. The city's heart had stopped beating, and into this silence, a new, terrifying sound was about to emerge. It would not be the sound of construction, or progress, or hope. It would be the sound of a war drum beaten by the very child the Waynes had left behind. The city believed it needed a miracle to save it from the abyss. But what it was about to receive was not a savior. It was an answer born of grief and fury, a force that would mistake vengeance for justice, and in doing so, drag Gotham even deeper into the night. When a system is fundamentally broken, any attempt to fix it with violence is doomed to become part of the problem. The arrival of the Batman was not a solution to Gotham's decay. It was its most potent and destructive symptom. Born from a singular trauma, this one-man war on crime offered the city a cathartic illusion of justice. But beneath the surface of this vigilante crusade lies a cold, brutal economic reality. Batman's methods are not healing Gotham. They are actively tearing it apart, piece by piece. His war is, first and foremost, a war on the city's infrastructure. Every high-speed pursuit in the Batmobile, a military-grade tank disguised as a car, is an act of profound economic vandalism. It is not a chase, it is a rolling demolition. Public roads are pulverized, storefronts are shattered, and vital city infrastructure, from power lines to water mains, is treated as disposable collateral in the pursuit of a single street-level criminal. The costs of these nightly rampages are not absorbed by some abstract entity. They are passed directly onto the people of Gotham. Municipal budgets, already strained to the breaking point by corruption and neglect, must be diverted from essential services like sanitation and education to fund constant emergency repairs. The city is forced to bleed its resources dry, patching the wounds inflicted not by a supervillain, but by its self-proclaimed protector. This destruction radiates outwards, poisoning the city's economic climate. Consider the astronomical, unspoken cost of insurance in a city where a bat-related firefight could erupt at any moment. For the small business owner, already struggling to survive in a dying economy, the premiums become unsustainable. How can a cafe owner afford coverage when their block could become the backdrop for a showdown between a vigilante and a gang of thugs? The answer is they cannot. Businesses are forced to close or operate without insurance, one stray batarang away from financial ruin. Batman doesn't just fight criminals. He creates an environment so volatile and unpredictable that legitimate commerce becomes a high-risk gamble, choking off the very economic life he claims to be safeguarding. Furthermore, his core strategy is a testament to a profound strategic failure. The tactic of beating criminals and handing them to the police is not a solution. It is a mechanism for overwhelming an already failed system. Gotham's justice system is a clogged, corrupted machine. The police are underfunded and demoralized, the courts are gridlocked, and prisons like Blackgate are little more than revolving doors for criminal recruitment. By dumping a constant stream of low-level offenders into this broken pipeline, Batman accomplishes nothing of substance. He creates massive administrative backlogs, drains public defender resources, and ensures that the system, incapable of processing the sheer volume, either releases these individuals back onto the streets or warehouses them in facilities that only harden their criminal resolve. He is treating a systemic disease by repeatedly punching its most visible tumors, ignoring the cancer that spreads beneath. This approach reveals the fundamental flaw in his crusade. It is a war on the symptoms, not the cause. He targets the desperate, the disenfranchised, the street-level dealers and enforcers who are themselves victims of Gotham's economic collapse. These are the people created by the city's rot, the unemployed factory workers, the abandoned youth, the individuals for whom crime is the only viable path. By physically brutalizing them, Batman is not dispensing justice. He is merely punishing the poor for the crime of their poverty. Each person he incapacitates is instantly replaceable, a new soldier ready to enlist in the armies of the night, driven by the same hopelessness. His war is a spectacular, violent, and ultimately futile exercise in managing the city's decline, not reversing it. The city, starved for a hero, embraced this violent spectacle as a sign of progress. But they were cheering for their own economic ruin. Batman was not cleansing the city. He was merely adding a new, more dynamic layer of chaos to its already existing misery. The damage was not just physical, but systemic. He was setting a new, brutal precedent. And in a city as dark as Gotham, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. His high-tech, fear-based assault on the city's criminal element was not going to go unanswered. It was an invitation, a challenge. The old order of crime was about to be swept away, but what would rise to take its place would be infinitely worse. In any ecosystem, the introduction of a new, apex predator forces every other creature to adapt, to evolve, or to die. The Batman was Gotham's new predator, a force of unparalleled technological superiority and psychological terror. But in his violent quest to eradicate the city's conventional crime, he did not end the war. He merely changed its rules. He triggered a horrifying evolutionary arms race, creating a perverse new market for a deadlier, more theatrical, and infinitely more destructive form of villainy. Before Batman, Gotham's underworld was governed by a grim, but understandable logic. The mobsters, like Carmine Falcone, were businessmen. Their currency was money and power. Their violence was a tool, used with precision to enforce contracts and eliminate competition. They were a cancer on the city, but they were a predictable cancer, one that operated within a certain framework of rational self-interest. They had no desire to burn the city to the ground. They wanted to own it. But you cannot fight a symbol with bullets and ledgers. Batman's arrival made their entire model obsolete overnight. He was a force of chaos they could neither intimidate, nor bribe, nor comprehend. To challenge a theatrical, larger-than-life symbol of fear, you need a theatrical, larger-than-life symbol of chaos. This is the fertile ground from which the supercriminal bloomed. Figures like the Joker, the Riddler, or the Scarecrow are not a random emergence of madness. They are the market's answer to Batman. They are the direct, logical consequence of his methods. His existence created a vacuum of purpose in the underworld, and they filled it not with a desire for wealth, but with a desire for ideology, for anarchy, for a performance grand enough to command the attention of the city's new, dark god. Batman wanted to be a symbol. In response, the city's madness gave him symbols of its own. This escalation was not just psychological, it was a technological and tactical arms race. Batman's use of military-grade armor, advanced surveillance, and non-lethal weaponry rendered the mob's traditional arsenal of Tommy guns and revolvers laughably primitive. To even compete, his new adversaries had to innovate. This led to an explosion of hyperviolence and specialized criminality. The Joker's weaponized chemical compounds, Mr. Freeze's cryogenic technology, Scarecrow's neurotoxins. This is not random villainy. This is bespoke terror, designed specifically to counteract the Batman's strengths and exploit the city's vulnerabilities on a scale the old mob could never dream of. Each new piece of technology in Batman's arsenal demanded a more destructive and esoteric response, trapping Gotham in a spiral of ever-increasing collateral damage. The very nature of crime was reforged in Batman's shadow. It ceased to be about profit and became about spectacle. The goal was no longer to control a territory, but to hold the entire city hostage. A bank robbery was no longer a simple heist. It was a deadly puzzle box orchestrated by the Riddler. A gang war was no longer a street corner shootout. It was a citywide chemical attack launched by the Joker. These new villains understood something the mob never did. In a city dominated by the Batman, the only currency that truly matters is fear. And they became masters of it, turning Gotham's streets into their personal stage for acts of mass terror. The scale of devastation grew exponentially, from back-alley murders to threats that endangered millions of lives. Batman had set out to hunt monsters, but instead, he cultivated them. He was a farmer of nightmares, his actions serving as the rain and sun that allowed a new crop of horrors to grow. The city was now caught in the crossfire of a war between gods and monsters, a war that he had personally instigated. The ordinary citizens, the very people he had sworn to protect, were no longer just victims of crime. They were the audience and the casualties in a grand pathological opera. His presence had fundamentally altered the DNA of Gotham's criminal underworld, transforming it from a manageable disease into an incurable plague of madness. And as the nights grew more violent and the explosions grew brighter, the psychological toll on the city's populace was reaching a breaking point. The war was not just being fought on the streets, it was now being fought inside the minds of every man, woman, and child trapped in Gotham's shadow. A city is more than its buildings and its economy. It is a fragile network of trust, a shared belief in a common future. The most devastating consequence of Batman's war is not the physical destruction, but the systematic annihilation of this social fabric. While the vigilante and his gallery of grotesques battle for the soul of Gotham, the souls of its ordinary citizens are being ground to dust, forgotten casualties in a war they never chose to fight. To live in Gotham is to live in a state of perpetual, low-grade terror. The defining feature of daily life is not hope or ambition, but a constant, gnawing anxiety. The threat is no longer a simple mugging in a dark alley. It is the possibility that your morning commute could be interrupted by a chemical attack, or that your apartment building could become the collateral damage in a rooftop battle between a man dressed as a bat and a clown with a rocket launcher. This is not a normal existence. It is the life of a citizen in a failed state, a permanent war zone where the abnormal has become the mundane. This environment systematically erodes the most fundamental human need, the sense of safety. This constant fear breeds a profound psychological paralysis. When terror becomes normalized, society begins to break down. The bonds of community, already strained by economic hardship, completely dissolve. Neighbors view each other not with solidarity, but with suspicion. Public spaces are no longer areas for communal gathering, but potential crime scenes to be navigated with caution. The city's residents retreat into themselves, their lives shrinking to the claustrophobic confines of their homes and workplaces. This creates a populace that is not only terrified but also atomized, incapable of the collective action and civic engagement required to heal a city from the ground up. How can you organize a neighborhood watch when you fear the monster who might answer your call for help is as dangerous as the one you are hiding from? Trust in institutions, the bedrock of any functioning society, utterly collapses. The Gotham City Police Department, already viewed as corrupt and ineffective, becomes a tragic punchline in the face of supercriminal threats. When the city's official protectors are consistently outmatched and overshadowed, citizens learn that their only hope is to be saved by a lawless, unaccountable vigilante. This dynamic is incredibly corrosive. It teaches people that systems do not work, that laws are irrelevant, and that salvation comes only through violence. The Batman, by positioning himself as the only effective solution, single-handedly delegitimizes the very concept of institutional justice, fostering a culture of cynicism and despair that makes genuine reform impossible. This psychological toll is perhaps Batman's most unforgivable legacy. He has created a city of hostages, trapped not just by criminals, but by the very narrative of their salvation. Children grow up in a world where the heroes are just as terrifying as the villains, where the sky is not a symbol of openness, but a source of dread, waiting for a signal to light up and announce the next chapter of violence. This is a form of mass psychological conditioning, training an entire population to accept chaos as the status quo and to see a brutal, extra-legal force as their only protector. It is the death of civic imagination, the end of the belief that the people of Gotham could ever save themselves. The city is sick, its spirit broken. The people are not participants in their destiny, they are spectators at their own ruin. They are caught in a horrifying feedback loop where their fear and paralysis only cede more power to the extreme forces that plague them. Batman may believe he is fighting for the innocent, but his war has created a new kind of victim. The citizen whose hope has been extinguished, whose trust has been shattered, and whose spirit has been conditioned to accept the endless night. But the architect of this psychological devastation is also a man of immense public influence, and the greatest, most tragic irony is that the very person perpetuating this cycle of fear by night is, by day, the one man with the power and resources to truly heal the city, a power he fundamentally misunderstands and misuses. The greatest lie in Gotham is not one told by a villain, but one lived by its supposed hero. By day, he is Bruce Wayne, the philanthropic scion, the public face of corporate responsibility. By night, he is the Batman, a creature of violence and fear. The city sees these as two different men, one trying to heal the wounds, the other fights. This is a fatal misconception. They are not opposing forces. They are two sides of the same destructive coin, and the bright promise of Wayne Enterprises is inextricably linked to the dark engine of Batman's war. At the heart of this paradox is a colossal misallocation of resources. Wayne Enterprises is a multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate with the power to reshape nations. In the hands of Bruce Wayne, it engages in high-profile philanthropy, funding orphanages, sponsoring arts programs, and writing checks for urban renewal projects. These are noble gestures designed to project an image of civic virtue, but they are little more than bandages on a gaping wound. The true potential of his fortune is not being used to heal Gotham's systemic sickness. Instead, it is being secretly siphoned into a black budget of unimaginable scale, funding a private, undeclared war. The most advanced and profitable division of Wayne Enterprises is not its medical or green energy sectors. It is its applied sciences division, a clandestine weapons manufacturer for a one-man army. The billions of dollars that could be invested in creating sustainable jobs in the Narrows, in building a truly independent and incorruptible justice system, or in funding comprehensive social programs to address the root causes of crime, are instead spent developing high-tech body armor, experimental vehicles, and a vast arsenal of personalized weaponry. Every dollar spent on a new Batmobile is a dollar not spent on a new public transit line. Every hour of research dedicated to a new surveillance gadget is an hour not spent developing technologies that could actually serve the public good. This creates a perverse and monopolistic economic loop. Wayne Enterprises, under the secret direction of Batman, becomes Gotham's primary defense contractor. It develops technologies of intimidation and control that no other entity, including the GCPD, can access or afford. This doesn't just give Batman a tactical advantage, it establishes a dangerous monopoly on security. He becomes the sole provider of a very specific, violent brand of safety, making the city dependent on him and his exclusive technology. This suffocates any potential for publicly led, democratic solutions to crime, reinforcing the narrative that only a billionaire with his own private military can keep the darkness at bay. The hypocrisy is staggering. Bruce Wayne hosts galas to raise money for the victims of inner-city violence, while the profits from his corporation are used to fuel the very vigilantism that escalates this violence to theatrical new heights. He decries the destruction wrought by supercriminals, yet his own company engineers the tools for the one-man arms race that makes their existence a near certainty. He is trapped in a feedback loop of his own making. His actions as Batman create a level of chaos that only a billionaire like Bruce Wayne could possibly afford to clean up, and the cleaning up mostly involves funding the next cycle of violence. His philanthropy is not a solution. It is a public relations campaign to mask the fact that his true passion lies in warfare, not welfare. This is the ultimate tragedy of Bruce Wayne. He possesses the mind, the resources, and the influence to enact real, lasting structural change. He could wage a true war on poverty, on corruption, on hopelessness. He could rebuild Gotham from its foundations up, using his immense power to create a city where a figure like Batman would no longer be necessary. But he is a prisoner of his own trauma. He chooses the visceral, immediate satisfaction of punishing criminals over the slow, difficult, and unglamorous work of fixing the system that creates them. He is a surgeon with the tools to cure the disease, who instead chooses, night after night, to merely amputate its limbs. His two identities do not work in concert. They are locked in a state of self-defeating conflict. And in this conflict, it is the city of Gotham that pays the ultimate price, bled dry by a war its greatest son refuses to end, and a peace he refuses to truly build. In the final analysis, the story of Gotham is not a tale of heroes and villains. It is a clinical study of a system caught in a perfect, self-perpetuating cycle of failure. It is the story of a city so profoundly broken that its greatest champion has become the central gear in the machine of its own destruction. The ultimate tragedy of Gotham is not that it is lost, but that the man who swore to save it is the very reason the night will never end. Let us re-examine the evidence. We began with a city already dying, its economic heart ripped out, its institutions rotted by corruption, creating a desperate populace for whom crime was a matter of survival. Into this decay came the fall of the Waynes, a blow that extinguished the last embers of civic-minded philanthropy and created a power vacuum filled by organized crime. This was the stage, set for a disaster long before the first bat appeared. The city was a patient in critical condition, slowly bleeding out. Then came the cure that was worse than the disease. The Batman. His war, framed as a righteous crusade, was an economic catastrophe, inflicting millions in infrastructural damage and overwhelming the justice system with a flood of low-level offenders. He waged war not on the sickness, the poverty and hopelessness, but on its feverish symptoms. This brutal, high-tech approach did not eradicate crime. It forced it to evolve. The rational mobsters were replaced by theatrical agents of chaos in a horrifying arms race, turning the city into a playground for supercriminals and making life for the average citizen a waking nightmare of psychological terror. All the while, the man with the power to truly fix the city, Bruce Wayne, chose another path. His vast fortune, capable of funding a complete social and economic rebirth for Gotham, was instead funneled into his private war. His company, Wayne Enterprises, became a clandestine defense contractor, its philanthropic efforts a mere facade, masking a deeper commitment to violence over renewal. He possessed the cure for Gotham's soul, but was addicted to the poison of his crusade. Every actor in this drama plays their part in perfect, tragic harmony. The criminals provide Batman with a reason to exist. Batman's violence escalates the nature of crime. The escalating crime terrorizes the populace, making them dependent on a savior. And the savior's methods only deepen the city's wounds, ensuring the cycle begins anew the next night. This is Gotham's inescapable loop. It is a closed system of trauma, where every solution only reinforces the original problem. Batman cannot save Gotham because he is a product of its sickness, and his actions are a fundamental part of its continued suffering. He is not a beacon of hope. He is a monument to failure. The failure of institutions, the failure of justice, and the failure of one man to see that true strength lies not in how hard you can fight, but in how intelligently you can rebuild. The city of Gotham is not waiting for a hero to save it from the abyss. It is trapped in the abyss, held there by the shadow of the Bat. To truly heal, Gotham does not need a better vigilante. It needs to be free of him. It needs a revolution of spirit, a grassroots rebuilding of its institutions, a courageous investment in its people, and a leader who understands that you cannot punch your way to a better future. But as long as its citizens look to the sky for a symbol of violent deliverance, that future will never come. The night in Gotham is not just an absence of light, it is a presence, and it is a presence that the city and its dark night endlessly recreate together. Picture the scene. New York City. An alien invasion is in full swing. A monstrous, armored space whale, a Chitauri leviathan, is gliding through the concrete canyons. And then, it happens. The Hulk, in a moment of pure, unadulterated awesome, launches himself into the air and delivers a single, perfectly cinematic punch that stops the beast dead in its tracks. It's one of the most iconic moments in superhero movie history. But here's a fun, friendly question from your neighborhood physicist. Did you ever wonder what happened to the guy in the hot dog stand a block away? The answer, I'm afraid, is that he was turned into a fine red mist. Let's put aside the alien for a moment and talk about the punch itself. To stop an object of that size and speed, let's be conservative and say it's the mass of a blue whale moving at 100 miles per hour, Hulk has to generate an astronomical amount of kinetic energy. We're talking about a force comparable to being hit by a freight train. But that energy doesn't just magically absorb into the Leviathan. It has to go somewhere. The first place it goes is into the air. When Hulk's fist connects, it compresses the air in front of it so violently that it creates a shockwave. This isn't a gentle puff of wind. This is an overpressure wave, the exact same phenomenon that makes a bomb so deadly. Imagine you're that hot dog vendor just trying to get through your Tuesday. You don't even see the punch, you just feel it. First, a wave of crushing pressure slams into you, traveling faster than the speed of sound. This is called barotrauma. Your eardrums rupture instantly, but the real problem is your lungs. Your body is mostly water, which doesn't compress easily. But your lungs are full of air. The shockwave passes through your torso, violently squeezing these air-filled sacs. The result is catastrophic internal damage. Your lungs are effectively shredded. Even if you were 3 blocks away, this wave of invisible force would be more than enough to end your story. No debris required. And we haven't even gotten to the main event yet. Now, let's bring the Leviathan back into the picture. After being punched, this multi-ton behemoth doesn't just vanish, it crashes, nose first, into the side of a glass and steel skyscraper. This is where things get even messier for anyone still miraculously standing. When an object of that mass hits a building, it doesn't just politely make a hole. It transfers its remaining momentum into the structure, causing a localized earthquake. But the immediate killer isn't the shaking ground, it's the windows. A modern skyscraper is essentially a giant wall of glass. Under the force of that impact, every single window on that building, and on every building for a block in every direction, would instantly shatter. But these are not the gentle shards of glass you get from dropping a drinking cup. The explosive force of the impact would propel these fragments outwards at hundreds of miles per hour. You are now standing in the middle of a hurricane of glass shrapnel, with each piece moving at the speed of a bullet. There's nowhere to hide. The air itself has become a weapon. Forget about the alien threat. The very architecture of the city has been turned against its inhabitants. Anyone caught in the open would be riddled with thousands of razor-sharp projectiles before they even heard the sound of the impact. So let's recap the fate of our hypothetical New Yorker. They've been hit by a concussive blast that has liquefied their internal organs, and then immediately sandblasted by a supersonic cloud of glass, all from a single heroic punch. The movie shows us cheering crowds and triumphant heroes. The reality would be a deafening silence, punctuated only by the sound of falling glass on empty streets. And if you think a little flying glass and some ruptured lungs are bad, you might want to brace yourself. Because we've only covered brute force. We haven't even begun to talk about what happens when the heroes start using their energy weapons. If a single punch from the Hulk can turn a city block into a blender of glass and pressure, you might think things can't get much worse. Oh, you sweet, optimistic soul. Welcome to the world of energy weapons, where you don't even need to be hit by a projectile to have a very, very bad day. From Iron Man's iconic repulsor blasts to the Chitauri's alien rifles, these light shows are a staple of any good superhero battle. But in reality, they're not just weapons. They are multi-purpose, physics-based crowd-clearing devices. Let's start with Iron Man's repulsors. The movies are a bit vague on the science, but we see them as concussive, kinetic blasts. To send a 300-pound Ultron drone flying, that blast has to carry a serious punch. But how does it do that? The most likely answer is that it's a focused burst of superheated plasma or particles. When that blast erupts from Tony Stark's hands, it does three wonderful and horrifying things to the immediate environment, all at the same time. First, and most obviously, there is the heat. We're talking about a contained burst of energy capable of melting steel. That means it's releasing an incredible amount of thermal radiation. Imagine standing next to a blast furnace, and then multiply that by 1,000. For anyone within a 50-foot radius of one of these blasts, the effect would be instantaneous. Your clothes would ignite. The surface of your skin would flash boil, resulting in immediate catastrophic third-degree burns over your entire body. You wouldn't even have time to scream, because the heat would have already seared your nerve endings. It's a silent, brutally effective way to be cooked from the outside in. Second, there is the light. The reason these blasts look so cool on screen is because they are blindingly bright. But blindingly isn't just a figure of speech here. The intensity of light required to carry that much energy would be comparable to looking directly at a welding arc from 2 inches away, or perhaps staring at a miniature sun. Anyone who glanced in the direction of the fight without military-grade eye protection would suffer instant and permanent retinal damage. The photoreceptor cells in your eyes would be bleached and destroyed, plunging you into darkness. So now you're on fire, and you're blind. A great start to your afternoon. But the real killer, the one that gets everyone, is the same villain we met in our last chapter, the overpressure wave. When an energy blast is fired, it superheats the column of air it travels through. Air, when heated that rapidly, expands violently. It's essentially creating a controlled directional explosion. So, just like with Hulk's punch, a devastating shockwave radiates outward from the path of every single blast. Every pew-pew from a Chitauri rifle, every pshoom from Iron Man's chest piece is generating its own personal, barotrauma-inducing shockwave. The air in downtown Manhattan would be a chaotic mess of intersecting pressure fronts, a deadly popcorn machine of invisible force that would rupture lungs and shatter eardrums for blocks around. So, while the heroes are engaged in their dazzling cosmic ballet, the streets below would be a charnel house. People would be simultaneously burned, blinded, and internally pulverized by the very air they're trying to breathe. It's a multisensory assault on the human body, delivered with all the pizzazz of a Hollywood blockbuster. The irony is that in a real-world version of the Battle of New York, the most dangerous place to be wouldn't be right next to a hero or a villain. It would be anywhere at all. And we're still just talking about the things happening at street level. We haven't even looked up yet. The real reign of terror in New York wasn't coming from alien guns. It was coming from the sky itself. There's a certain cinematic grandeur to a skyscraper collapsing. In movies, it's a slow, almost majestic process, a dramatic backdrop for the hero's struggle. But in the cold, hard world of physics, a falling skyscraper isn't a set piece. It's a gravity-powered weapon of mass destruction, and during the Battle of New York, the sky was literally falling. Let's pick a victim. Say, a 60-story office building that's just had its structural integrity compromised by a stray Leviathan. The first thing to understand is that it doesn't just topple over like a felled tree. Modern buildings are designed with structural redundancy, but when that fails on a catastrophic scale, they tend to collapse downwards into their own footprint. This is a process affectionately known in engineering circles as pancaking. Each floor slams down onto the one below it, creating a chain reaction that pulverizes concrete and steel as it goes. This is not a gentle slide. It's a violent, accelerating implosion. Now imagine you're an office worker on the 40th floor who managed to avoid the initial impact. Your bigger problem now is gravity. As the building collapses, you and everything around you begin to fall. Your sturdy oak desk, the office water cooler, your coworker Bob from accounting, all are now projectiles in a race to the ground. An object falling from that height, even with air resistance, can easily reach a terminal velocity of over 120 miles per hour. So, the area around the building's base is suddenly bombarded with thousands of pieces of debris, from filing cabinets to ceiling tiles, each hitting the ground with the force of a small car crash. It's a hailstorm from hell. But the most insidious weapon created by a collapsing building isn't the big stuff. It's the small stuff. The process of pancaking violently pulverizes tons upon tons of concrete, drywall, glass, and office furniture into a fine, gritty dust. This massive cloud of material doesn't just settle. It's hot, full of trapped air, and it moves with terrifying speed and energy. It billows outwards from the base of the collapse, creating a pyroclastic-like flow, the exact same phenomenon that makes volcanoes so deadly. This isn't a dust cloud you can just brush off your clothes. It's a dense, choking wave of abrasive particles that moves at highway speeds, sandblasting everything in its path and filling the air with a thick, unbreathable slurry. If you're caught in this cloud, your fate is sealed. The first breath you take would fill your lungs with a mixture of pulverized glass, concrete, and asbestos. It would be like inhaling a lungful of liquid sandpaper. The particles would shred the delicate tissues of your alveoli, causing immediate asphyxiation. The official cause of death for most people in the vicinity of a skyscraper collapse wouldn't be crushed by debris. It would be involuntary respiration of an entire office building. For days after the Battle of New York, the air in lower Manhattan would be a toxic, unbreathable soup, a lingering monument to the city's fallen giants. The heroes are shown flying through these clouds, seemingly unaffected. In reality, even someone as tough as Captain America would have his lungs shredded by this airborne menace. The Avengers weren't just fighting aliens, they were fighting in an environment that had become fundamentally hostile to biological life. And a single collapsing skyscraper is just the appetizer. The Avengers, being the overachievers they are, decided to scale things up significantly. What happens when it's not just a building falling, but an entire city? So we've established that a single falling skyscraper is a localized apocalypse. It's a terrible, messy, and thoroughly lethal event for anyone in the immediate vicinity. But you have to admire the Avengers' commitment to one-upmanship. For them, dropping a single building is amateur hour. For a truly memorable third-act finale, you need to think bigger. You need to drop something on the planet that has its own zip code, like, say, an entire city. Welcome to the Sokovia catastrophe. The villain's plan: turn the capital city into a man-made asteroid and drop it on the Earth to cause an extinction-level event. The hero's plan: blow it up into smaller, more manageable pieces before it hits. It's a spectacular display of power, but let's apply a little friendly physics to their solution. What happens when you blow up a city-sized rock a few thousand feet above the ground? You get a shotgun blast from God. The kinetic energy of that falling landmass doesn't just disappear, it's conserved. By breaking it into smaller pieces, the Avengers didn't prevent the impact. They just spread it out over a much, much wider area. Let's calculate the energy involved. A chunk of rock and city infrastructure a mile wide, falling from a significant altitude, would carry an impact energy that makes nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. We are talking about an energy release comfortably in the range of the Chicxulub impactor, the asteroid that got rid of the dinosaurs. When that debris field hit the ground, it wouldn't have just flattened the surrounding countryside. It would have created a seismic shockwave felt across the entire continent. The impact would have vaporized millions of tons of rock and water, throwing a colossal plume of dust and superheated steam into the upper atmosphere. This debris would then block out the sun, plunging the Earth into a nuclear winter scenario that would cause global crop failures and a collapse of the food chain. The Avengers didn't save the world from an extinction event. They just turned one giant, world-ending bullet into 1,000 continent-killing pieces of shrapnel. But perhaps you prefer your falling megastructures to be a bit more high-tech. Let's travel to Washington, D.C. for the fall of the Insight helicarriers. These things are massive, flying aircraft carriers laden with fuel, munitions, and advanced electronics. The movie shows them crashing into buildings in a dramatic, almost beautiful way, but the reality would be a trifecta of terror. First, the impact itself. Each carrier, weighing thousands of tons, would strike the ground with the force of a tactical nuclear weapon, creating a massive crater and triggering localized earthquakes that would shatter every building for miles around. Second, the fuel. A machine that size requires a horrifying amount of jet fuel. Upon impact, this fuel would aerosolize and ignite, creating a firestorm that would engulf a significant portion of the city. We're not talking about a simple fire. We're talking about a self-sustaining vortex of flame, sucking in oxygen and incinerating everything in its path. The air itself would become a weapon, with temperatures reaching thousands of degrees. Third, the munitions. These were warships. They were packed to the brim with missiles, cannon shells, and other explosives. The impact and subsequent firestorm would cook off these munitions, resulting in a series of massive, unpredictable secondary explosions that would continue for hours, turning the entire crash site into a continuously exploding hellscape. The city of Washington, D.C. wouldn't be damaged, it would be functionally erased from the map, a smoldering, toxic crater. Whether it's a flying city or a fleet of flying warships, the lesson from physics is clear. When superheroes defy gravity on a grand scale, the planet pays the price. They operate on a level where their victories are indistinguishable from natural disasters of a global scale. But the destruction isn't always so loud and explosive. Sometimes the deadliest weapons are the ones you can't even see, the silent killers that attack your very senses. By now, we've established that a superhero battle is a festival of explosions, impacts, and falling debris. It's loud, it's messy, and it's catastrophically destructive. But some of the most dangerous and damaging aspects of these conflicts aren't the things that go boom. They are the silent, invisible forces that turn the environment itself into a weapon, attacking your very senses with the cold, hard logic of physics. First, let's talk about the sound. Not the explosions, but the simple act of movement. We see heroes like Iron Man or Thor zipping through the skies of New York at incredible speeds. To get from Stark Tower to the heart of the battle in seconds, they have to be moving at supersonic speeds, and anything that moves faster than sound creates a sonic boom. A sonic boom isn't just a loud noise, it's a shockwave, a cone of high-pressure air that trails behind the object. On the ground, this translates to a sudden, violent change in air pressure. A low-altitude sonic boom from a fighter jet can shatter windows and crack plaster. Now imagine that happening not once, but continuously, as multiple heroes and alien ships crisscross the sky above a densely populated city. The sonic booms from the Battle of New York would have been a relentless, rolling thunder of destruction. Every window that wasn't already shattered by an explosion would be blown out by the constant barrage of shockwaves from above. The noise level would be beyond deafening. It would be physically painful, capable of causing permanent hearing loss and disorientation to anyone on the street. It would be like living inside a drum being beaten by a giant for hours on end. The city's soundscape would become an instrument of torture. Next, let's talk about the light. The portal that the Chitauri opened over Manhattan wasn't just a doorway. It was a wound in space-time. The energy required to maintain such a wormhole would be immense, and it would radiate light of an incredible, otherworldly intensity. Add to this the constant flashes from energy weapons, explosions, and Iron Man's thrusters. The city would be bathed in a strobe effect of blinding light. We already know that looking at a single blast can cause retinal damage. But the cumulative effect of this citywide light show would be devastating. It would be disorienting, seizure-inducing, and would make it impossible to see real, physical threats. It's sensory overload on a biblical scale. Finally, there's the most subtle killer of all, the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. The Chitauri and the Ultron drones are based on advanced, high-energy technology. When their ships or bodies are destroyed in massive explosions, it's highly probable that they would release a powerful EMP. This is a burst of electromagnetic radiation that overloads and fries electronic circuits. A single large EMP blast over a city like New York or Sokovia would be the final nail in the coffin of modern society. Forget the physical destruction for a moment. An EMP would mean the instantaneous failure of the power grid. All lights would go out. The communication network, cell phones, internet, radio would cease to exist. All modern transportation, reliant on electronic engine management, would stop dead. But the real catastrophe would be the loss of critical infrastructure. Hospital life support systems would fail. Water purification and pumping stations would shut down. The financial system, which exists almost entirely as digital data, would be wiped out. The heroes might win the physical battle, but the EMP would have already dealt a mortal blow to the city's ability to function, let alone recover. These silent killers, sound, light, and electromagnetism, show that the danger of a superhero battle isn't just about what you can see. It's about the fundamental laws of physics being weaponized, turning every aspect of the environment into a threat. The world they leave behind is not just broken, it's deafened, blinded, and electronically lobotomized. And for the poor human bodies caught in the middle of all this, the experience is even more personal and far more gruesome. We've spent a lot of time on the big picture: collapsing buildings, citywide firestorms, and invisible waves of energy. But let's get personal for a moment. What actually happens to a human body, your body, when it's exposed to the casual, everyday physics of a superhero brawl? Forget being directly punched by the Hulk. Let's talk about what happens when you're just nearby. The truth is, our soft, fleshy bodies are beautifully designed for life on a relatively calm planet, and they are spectacularly unprepared for the forces the Avengers unleash. Let's begin with the simple act of being thrown by an explosion. In movies, a character gets blasted across a room, hits a wall, shakes their head, and gets back up. In reality, this is a death sentence, and it has a name: J-force. When the shockwave from an explosion hits you, it doesn't just push you. It accelerates you from 0 to a very high speed in a fraction of a second. The G-forces involved in this acceleration would be immense, far beyond what even trained fighter pilots can endure. Your internal organs, which are not rigidly fixed in place, would slam into the inside of your skeleton. Your brain would smash against your skull, causing a severe concussion or fatal hemorrhage. Your aorta, the largest artery in your body, could tear away from your heart. You would be dead before you even hit the wall. But let's say you somehow survive the acceleration. Now you have to deal with the deceleration, the part where you hit the wall. The impact would transfer all that kinetic energy to your skeleton, resulting in what doctors politely call massive blunt force trauma. This means multiple, complex bone fractures, ruptured organs, and catastrophic internal bleeding. The idea of walking it off is a beautiful fiction. In reality, you'd be a tragic, broken mess. Now for an even more intimate and horrifying concept: spalling. This is a genuinely nasty piece of physics. When a powerful shock wave, like the one from Hulk's punch or an energy blast, travels through a medium and hits a boundary with a less dense medium, say from your muscle and organs to the air inside your lungs, it can cause pieces of the first medium to break off, or spall. In battlefield medicine, this is seen when a shockwave from a bomb blast travels through a soldier's body armor. The shockwave itself might not penetrate, but it can cause fragments from the inside of the armor to break off and spray into the soldier's body. Now apply that to your own anatomy. A powerful shockwave passing through your torso would hit the boundary of your ribs and your lungs. It's conceivable that the wave could cause small fragments of bone from the inside of your ribs to spall off and be blasted into your lung tissue. It's a way of being shot from the inside out, by your own skeleton. This is the level of gruesome, microscopic violence that superhero physics would inflict on the human form. Our bodies are simply not built for this world. We are fragile bags of water and electricity evolved to worry about falling out of trees, not about the organ-shredding overpressure from a god's hammer striking an alien's shield. Every single civilian shown cowering behind a car in these movie battles is, in scientific terms, already dead. They just don't know it yet. They are victims of barotrauma, G-force, and spalling, a walking checklist of fatal injuries. The heroes save the day, but they do so in a world where the background extras are, by any reasonable scientific standard, undergoing complete biological collapse. And for the city that survives, the nightmare is far from over. The battle may be finished, but the quiet apocalypse of the aftermath is just beginning. The final battle is over. The last villain has been punched into submission, the portal in the sky has closed, and the heroes are presumably off to enjoy a well-deserved shawarma. But for the city they saved, the credits are not rolling. This is where the real, uncinematic disaster begins. The morning after. The long, slow, and agonizing process of dealing with the environmental and economic wasteland left behind. First, let's talk about the alien in the room. Or rather, the alien all over the room. The Battle of New York left the city littered with the wreckage of Chitauri chariots, weapons, and the armored husks of leviathans. What exactly are these things made of? We can be sure it's not standard, Earth-grade aluminum. This is advanced, exotic alien technology. When this wreckage is left to rust in the rain, or gets pulverized into the dust that now blankets the city, these unknown materials will leach into the environment. We're talking about heavy metals and alloys that our ecosystem has never encountered. They would contaminate the soil, making it impossible to grow anything. They would seep into the water table, poisoning the city's drinking water for generations. The Hudson River would become a toxic soup of extraterrestrial compounds. The long-term health effects on the population, from new forms of cancer to bizarre neurological disorders, would be a mystery that doctors would be trying to solve for decades. This brings us to the air itself. We've already discussed the cloud of pulverized building materials. Now let's give it a name: Sokovia dust, or metropolis mix. This toxic airborne cocktail of concrete, glass, asbestos, and now alien metals would be the defining public health crisis of the 21st century. Breathing this air would be a long-term death sentence. Rates of asthma, silicosis, and cancer would skyrocket among the city's residents and the unfortunate cleanup crews. The city wouldn't just be physically broken, its very atmosphere would be poisonous. And finally, we arrive at the most mundane and therefore most terrifying problem of all: money. Who pays for this? The sheer cost of cleaning up and rebuilding a city like New York or Sokovia would be staggering, running into the trillions of dollars. But here's the kicker. Read the fine print on any standard insurance policy. You'll likely find clauses for fires, floods, and earthquakes. What you will not find is a clause for damage resulting from an interdimensional alien invasion or destruction caused by a Norse god brawling with a gamma-radiated monster. Every single insurance claim would be denied under an act of God or act of war clause. The financial burden would fall entirely on individuals, businesses, and a government that is itself on the verge of collapse. The result would be total economic annihilation. Businesses, unable to rebuild, would declare bankruptcy. Individuals, having lost their homes and jobs, would become refugees. The city's tax base would evaporate, meaning no money for police, firefighters, or sanitation. The affected area would not be rebuilt into a shining metropolis. It would be abandoned, a quarantined ghost town, a toxic monument to a victory that cost everything. The heroes flew away, but they left behind a population that was not only traumatized and sick, but also utterly bankrupt. In the end, the physics of an Avengers battle tells a clear and brutal story. The heroes fight for humanity, but they do so using forces that our bodies, our cities, and our planet are not designed to withstand. Their victories leave behind a wake of destruction so complete, environmentally, biologically, and economically, that the world they save is barely worth living in. They are not just saviors, they are walking, talking, city-toppling natural disasters, leaving humanity to pick up the pieces in the quiet, desolate morning after. Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we're taking a field trip to one of the most prestigious, exclusive, and frankly hazardous educational institutions in all of fiction, the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Now, when you think of the X-Men, you probably picture epic, world-saving battles and sleek black jets. But we're not here for that. We're here to pull back the curtain and ask the real questions. What is the school cafeteria food like when one of the students can literally turn it into poison with a single touch? What does the dating scene look like when a first kiss could be lethal? And what, for the love of all that is holy, does the school nurse do when a student sneezes and accidentally blows a hole in the dormitory wall? Forget the fight against Magneto. We're about to explore a far greater, more chaotic battle. The simple, day-to-day struggle of surviving high school when your roommate is a telepath and your lab partner has laser eyes. So buckle up, because we're about to enroll in Mutant High. Let's start with the absolute bedrock of any boarding school experience, the dorm room. For most of us, this was a place of newfound freedom, questionable posters, and a passive-aggressive war with our roommate over whose turn it was to take out the trash. But at Xavier's, the dorm room isn't a sanctuary. It's a hilarious, 24/7 social experiment in why privacy is a lie. Imagine, for a moment, you're a teenage mutant, just trying to write in your diary about your massive crush on the new guy from Alaska. Sounds normal, right? Except your roommate is John Gray, a telepath. You're not writing Dear Diary. You're essentially live streaming your innermost thoughts directly into her brain, complete with emotional emojis. The concept of a secret doesn't exist. Every embarrassing thought, every cringy poem, every silent complaint about her snoring is an open book. Forget locking your diary. You'd need a helmet made of tinfoil and prayer, and even then, it's probably a 50-50 shot. But telepathy is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's talk about personal space. You've got your side of the room, they've got theirs. Simple. Unless your roommate is Kitty Pryde. You come back from class to find her just casually phasing through your shared wall to borrow your chemistry textbook, which was in your locked trunk. Or worse, you wake up in the middle of the night to find her halfway sunk into the floor because she had a bad dream. There are no doors, no locks, no boundaries. There is only the awkward silence of knowing your roommate can treat solid matter like a gentle suggestion. And what if you get stuck with a roommate with a more physical mutation? Picture sharing a room with Angel. This isn't a guy with a cool back tattoo. This is a teenager with a 12-foot wingspan. Your cozy dorm room now has the spatial dynamics of an airplane hangar. Every time he turns around, a wing knocks your carefully arranged action figures off the shelf. He has to sleep diagonally just to fit on the bed, and his molted feathers get into everything. It's like living with a very handsome, very large pigeon who is constantly complaining about knocking over your lava lamp. The sheer variety of powers means that every roommate pairing is a potential sitcom waiting to happen. The guy who generates intense cold, rooming with the guy who is constantly on fire. The girl who can talk to squirrels, whose roommate is terrified of rodents. Every day would be a fresh new hell of logistical nightmares. Whose turn is it to clean the scorch marks off the ceiling? Who has to explain to Professor X why the window is frozen solid in the middle of May? Dorm life at Xavier's isn't about learning to live with others. It's an advanced, non-stop course in survival and radical acceptance. It teaches you that privacy is a privilege, not a right, and that a good pair of noise-canceling headphones is useless when your roommate's snores are literal sonic booms. But hey, if you think sharing a bedroom is tough, just wait until you see what happens when you put all these hormonal, super-powered teens together in a classroom. So you've somehow survived the nightly chaos of the dorms. Congratulations. Your reward? a full day of classes. But at the Xavier School, the academic curriculum is a beautiful, terrifying cocktail of the mundane and the metaphysical. One moment you're trying to solve for X in algebra, and the next, you're trying not to accidentally set your teacher on fire. Welcome to the academic grind, mutant style. On the surface, the class schedule looks deceptively normal. You've got your standard high school fare. World history with Wolverine, English literature with Storm, maybe even shop class with Colossus. But imagine the sheer, unadulterated chaos of these lessons. How do you focus on the socio-economic causes of the French Revolution when the kid next to you is so bored he's subconsciously making it rain, indoors, directly over your textbook? How does a teacher maintain control of a class where a flustered student might accidentally teleport themselves and their desk into the janitor's closet? Every lesson is a minefield of potential distractions. A simple pop quiz could trigger so much performance anxiety that the class troublemaker, a kid named Bobby, freezes the entire room solid. The classic "dog ate my homework" excuse suddenly becomes "Cyclops looked at my homework and now it's a small pile of ash." But alongside these normal classes, you have the courses that are unique to Xavier's. These are the classes listed in the course catalog with titles like Power Control 101, Introduction to Telepathic Ethics, and Advanced Combat Theory. This is where things go from chaotic to actively life-threatening. The final exam for energy projection isn't a multiple-choice test. It's trying to hit a target drone without also vaporizing the principal's prized rose bushes. The Ethics of Mind Reading class is basically a group therapy session where students have to debate whether it's morally acceptable to read the mind of the cute senior to find out if they like you back. The answer is always no, but the debate is, apparently, eternal. The teachers at this school deserve combat pay and a lifetime supply of aspirin. Imagine being a history teacher trying to get through a lecture while a student in the front row is literally a shapeshifter who keeps transforming into the historical figures you're talking about. It's distracting. Or imagine being Storm, trying to teach Shakespeare's The Tempest to a room full of teenagers who could, if they got ticked off, create an actual tempest. You have to be part guidance counselor, part drill sergeant, and part bomb disposal expert, all while trying to explain the significance of iambic pentameter. And let's not forget the substitute teachers, the sheer terror of being a non-mutant substitute teacher who walks into a classroom and asks a student named Magma to please sit down, only to have her accidentally turn her desk into a small, bubbling volcano. You don't get an apple at the end of the day. You get a formal apology from Professor Xavier and a hefty check to cover the therapy bills. The education at Xavier's isn't just about preparing for college or a career. It's a daily exercise in controlled chaos, where learning about photosynthesis is just as important as learning not to photosynthesize yourself. It's a place where the biggest academic challenge isn't passing your finals, but making it through the school day without becoming a victim of a science experiment gone horribly, horribly wrong. Of course, all this forced proximity and high-stakes classroom drama is the perfect breeding ground for one thing: teenage romance. And if you think the classes are dangerous, you haven't seen anything yet. If there is one universal truth about high school, it's that it is a swirling vortex of hormones, crushes, and deeply awkward romantic encounters. Now take all of that drama and add superpowers. Welcome to the dating scene at Xavier's school, a place where "I love you" can be immediately followed by "Oh my God, are you on fire?" For a normal teenager, the biggest risk on a first date is spilling a drink or saying something embarrassing. For a mutant, the stakes are just a little bit higher. Let's take the classic example of Rogue. She's a sweet Southern girl who just wants to hold her boyfriend's hand. The problem? Her touch is a biological weapon. A simple romantic caress doesn't just transfer affection, it transfers her partner's life force, memories, and superpowers directly into her, leaving him a weakened, comatose husk. The first kiss isn't a magical moment, it's a potentially lethal biohazard event. Every date with Rogue is a high-stakes game of the floor is lava, where the floor is her skin. But she's not the only one with romantic challenges. Imagine trying to have a relationship with Cyclops. Scott Summers is the brooding, handsome leader type. A total catch. Except for the small fact that his eyes are portals to a dimension of pure concussive force. He can't look at the love of his life without his special ruby quartz glasses, or he risks blasting her through a wall. That romantic, soul-gazing moment every couple has. For him, it's an act of extreme weapons control. Honey, I love you, but please, for the love of God, don't ask me to take my sunglasses off. I just had that wall rebuilt. The entire landscape of mutant dating is a minefield of comical and dangerous possibilities. Think about asking someone to the school dance. You work up the courage, you walk over, but your anxiety causes your powers to flare up, and you accidentally freeze the hallway solid. Or consider the simple act of a breakup. A normal breakup is sad. A mutant breakup can be a localized natural disaster. An angry pyrokinetic might have a small emotional outburst and set fire to the lawn. A telekinetic, in a fit of rage, might accidentally levitate the entire football team's locker room. The school's maintenance budget must be astronomical, dedicated almost entirely to repairing the collateral damage of teenage heartbreak. And let's not forget the jealousy. It's one thing to see your ex talking to someone new. It's another thing entirely when your ex has a shape-shifting girlfriend who can impersonate you, flawlessly, just to mess with your head. The potential for high-tech, superpowered catfishing and emotional warfare is off the charts. You have telepaths who can read their partner's mind to see if they're cheating, a total invasion of privacy that probably feels justified at the moment. You have mutants with super hearing who can accidentally overhear their crush's private conversations from 3 rooms away. It's a dating pool filled with people who have zero boundaries, by design. Dating at Xavier's requires a level of trust and communication that most adults struggle with, all while navigating the emotional roller coaster of being a teenager. You have to be okay with the fact that your girlfriend might accidentally phase you both into the Earth's core during a hug, or that your boyfriend's romantic serenade might literally shatter every window in the building. It's love in a world without a safety net. But hey, if a romance-induced injury does happen, there's always one person you can count on, and her job is an absolute non-stop nightmare. Let's pay a visit to the school nurse. In any school, the nurse's office is a place of refuge. It's where you go to get an ice pack for a bump, a bandage for a scrape, or just to lie down for 10 minutes to get out of gym class. But at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, the nurse's office is less of a clinic and more of a combination of a high-tech science lab, a supernatural crisis center, and a support group for the truly bizarre. The school nurse isn't just a healthcare professional. She's a miracle worker with the patience of a saint and nerves of absolute steel. Forget sprained ankles and stomach aches. The daily patient log at Xavier's would read like a rejected script from a sci-fi body horror film. The first patient of the day isn't a kid with a fever. It's a student who, during a growth spurt, has accidentally sprouted a second set of fully functional wings and now can't fit through the door. The nurse doesn't reach for a thermometer. She reaches for a tape measure and a phone book for a custom tailor. The next kid stumbles in because he tried to teleport from his dorm to the cafeteria and splinched himself, leaving his left leg embedded up to the knee in a solid brick wall. You can't fix that with a simple bandage. The nurse has to call for a geologist and hope that Kitty Pryde is free to help phase him out without causing structural damage. The first aid cabinet in this place would be a marvel of medical absurdity. Next to the aspirin, you'd find a set of lead-lined gloves for handling students who've become temporarily radioactive. Next to the cotton swabs, there would be a collection of power-dampening collars in various sizes, for those moments when a student's powers are flaring so badly they've become a danger to themselves and others. There are no tongue depressors, but there are custom-made mouth guards for students whose teeth are made of diamond and who keep accidentally biting through their forks in the cafeteria. The most used item in the entire office is probably a simple sign that says, Please try not to phase through the examination table. And what about mental health? The psychological toll of being a mutant teenager is immense. The nurse is also the unofficial school therapist for ailments you won't find in any medical textbook. How do you comfort a girl who is constantly hearing the thoughts of every insect within a 5-mile radius? What do you say to a boy who is deeply depressed because his skin has turned to solid, unfeeling rock, and he can no longer feel a hug? This is where the job transcends medicine and becomes pure, unfiltered empathy. The nurse at Xavier's is healing souls as much as she is patching up bodies. She has to be an expert in biology, physics, metaphysics, and psychology all at once. She has to know what to do when a student's sneeze has the concussive force of a shotgun blast, how to treat a sunburn on a kid who is literally made of living ice, and how to handle the paperwork when a student accidentally teleports all the school's flu shots to the moon. Her job is a relentless, non-stop parade of the impossible. She is the unsung, overworked hero of the entire institution. So, while the X-Men are out saving the world, she's back at the school, dealing with the real crises. Because Magneto might be a global threat, but he's never had to deal with a teenager who has accidentally turned himself inside out. And to prevent these kinds of mishaps, the school has to have a rulebook. A rulebook that must be the most surreal document ever written. Every school runs on a set of rules. They are the guardrails designed to keep order and prevent total chaos. No running in the halls. No chewing gum in class. Raise your hand before you speak. At the Xavier school, they have those rules too, but they're filed away in a much larger, weirder, and infinitely more stressed-out rulebook, right next to regulations that sound like they were written by a surrealist poet on a deadline. Imagine the student handbook at Xavier's. Page 1 probably has the standard mission statement, but by page 2, things get specific. Rule number 27. Students are prohibited from opening unauthorized dimensional portals in the library. Yes, Hank, we're talking to you. Rule number 42. The use of telepathy to obtain answers during final exams is considered cheating and will result in an automatic failing grade. Rule 58. Please refrain from phasing through other students' locked dorm rooms. Personal space is still a concept we're trying to enforce. This isn't a list of guidelines. It's a collection of preventative measures born from years of very specific, very strange incidents. Every rule tells a story, and it's usually a story that ends with a hefty repair bill. The school's safety posters would be a work of art. Instead of stop, drop, and roll, you'd have posters demonstrating the proper way to brace yourself for a psychic attack. Instead of look both ways before crossing the street, you'd have look in all directions, including up before entering the courtyard, in case of unscheduled aerial sparring. The sheer amount of liability this school carries would make an insurance underwriter break down in tears. There's a reason the school is a non-profit. No for-profit institution would ever touch this place. But what happens when these rules are broken? What does punishment look like in a school for superpowered teenagers? You can't just give them detention and have them write lines on a chalkboard. A board telekinetic could have the entire classroom of desks doing the can-can in 5 minutes. The punishments have to be as creative and power-specific as the infractions. Did you use your super speed to run through the halls? Congratulations! Your detention is to spend the afternoon polishing every single panel of Cerebro's helmet to a mirror shine, by hand, without your powers. Did you and your rival get into a little energy blast fight on the front lawn? Your punishment is to resod the entire 10-acre field with a single trowel. The ultimate form of discipline at Xavier's is probably being assigned chores with Wolverine. You want to act tough, bub? Go clean the gunk out of the Blackbird's jet engines. Nothing straightens out a rebellious teenager faster than the prospect of spending a Saturday listening to a grumpy Canadian complain about the state of the world while scraping alien guts off a landing gear. It's a character-building experience. The entire system of rules and punishments at Xavier's is a masterclass in controlled chaos. It's an attempt to impose a sliver of order onto a student body that is, by its very nature, disorderly. It's a constant, uphill battle fought by Professor X and his staff, who have to be both educators and wardens in a prison of puberty and superpowers. But school isn't all about rules and classes. There's also the fun stuff, the after-school activities and clubs, and at Xavier's, even the hobbies are turned up to 11. After a long day of dodging optic blasts in the classroom and navigating the emotional minefield of the cafeteria, a student needs to unwind. Every normal high school has its after-school clubs, chess club, drama club, maybe a sports team. At Xavier's, they have those too, but they also have extracurriculars that would make a health and safety inspector's head explode. These aren't just hobbies. They are high-octane, uninsurable adventures in adolescent chaos. Let's start with the crown jewel of Xavier's after-school program, the Danger Room. In any other context, this would be seen as a sophisticated, military-grade death trap. But at Xavier's, it's treated like the school gymnasium. Hey guys, want to go run the Attack of the Killer Sentinels simulation after class? I hear they've added a new crushing piston feature. This isn't your average game of dodgeball. This is a game where the balls are laser cannons, and the floor can turn into a pit of crocodiles at a moment's notice. The permission slip for the Danger Room Club must be a 50-page legal document that basically signs away your right to sue if you are vaporized, dismembered, or otherwise inconvenienced by a holographic alien death squad. But not everyone is a fan of simulated combat. For the less physically inclined, there are other clubs. Imagine the gossip that goes on in the Telepaths Club. It wouldn't just be whispering about who likes whom. It would be a live, unfiltered stream of the entire school's collective consciousness. They probably call their newsletter the Mind Reader's Digest. Then there's the support group for visually obvious mutations, where kids like Nightcrawler and Beast can get together and complain about how hard it is to find clothes that accommodate tails and oversized feet. It's probably one of the most genuinely important and emotionally resonant clubs in the entire school. And what about school sports? A simple game of baseball at Xavier's is an exercise in absurdity. The pitcher could have super speed, throwing the ball so fast you can't even see it. The batter could be a telekinetic, who just gently nudges the ball with their mind and sends it flying into a low Earth orbit. The outfielder might be a teleporter, who just blips into existence right where the ball is about to land. The score isn't just a measure of points. It's a measure of how many times the game had to be stopped to repair the fabric of space-time. Even the gentler hobbies are fraught with peril. The school's gardening club has to deal with a student who can make plants grow at an explosive rate, turning a simple tomato patch into a man-eating jungle in under an hour. The drama club's production of Romeo and Juliet is constantly interrupted because the student playing Romeo is a shapeshifter who keeps getting stage fright and turning into a filing cabinet. Every activity, no matter how mundane it seems, has the potential to spiral into beautiful, super-powered chaos. These after-school clubs are more than just a way to pass the time. They are the place where these students truly learn to integrate their powers into their lives, to find joy and community in the things that make them different. The Danger Room isn't just about fighting, it's about trust. The sports teams aren't just about winning, they're about control. It's in these moments of supposed fun that the real education at Xavier's happens. And it's in these moments, and all the others we've explored, that we find the true heart of this strange and wonderful school. So, after our tour through the chaotic dorms, the explosive classrooms, and the emotionally hazardous dating scene of the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, it's easy to see the place as a non-stop, surreal comedy of errors. A school where the daily routine is a tightrope walk over a pit of absurdity, and the biggest challenge isn't mastering your powers, but simply surviving puberty without leveling a city block. And yes, on one level, it's absolutely hilarious to imagine. We've laughed at the idea of a telepathic roommate who knows all your embarrassing secrets, the poor teacher trying to dodge energy blasts, and the nurse who needs a degree in 7 different fields just to handle a typical Tuesday. We've seen how every aspect of normal teenage life, from classes to crushes to after-school clubs, is amplified into something strange, dangerous, and wildly unpredictable. It's a world that seems completely alien to our own. But when you strip away the superpowers, when you look past the optic blasts and the shape-shifting, what you're left with is something deeply, fundamentally human. Beneath all the chaos, the Xavier School is a story about a group of kids who feel like outsiders. They are struggling with changes to their bodies they don't understand and can't always control. They are desperate to fit in, to find someone who gets them, to fall in love, and to figure out who they are supposed to be in a world that often seems afraid of them. They are learning to manage the very things that make them different, and trying to turn those differences from a source of shame into a source of strength. And that, right there, is the universal high school experience. Superpowers or not, we've all felt that awkwardness, that fear, that desperate need for connection. We've all had to learn how to control the messy, chaotic parts of ourselves. The story of Xavier's isn't really about mutants. It's about teenagers. The powers are just a metaphor, a brilliant, comic book exaggeration of the internal turmoil that every single one of us goes through. So, while their daily lives are filled with a level of chaos that would make any normal high school look like a peaceful, meditative retreat, the core of their journey is our own. It's about finding your place, finding your people, and surviving the beautiful, awkward, and sometimes explosive years of growing up. Because whether you're worried about acne or accidentally incinerating your homework, some things, it seems, never change. Thanks for watching.